Good afternoon, Year 8. We're looking at Magwitch from Great Expectations again. Today we're going to be looking at his sort of life before Pip met him on shore, because he lived on one of these prison ships. It's really interesting, actually. I didn't know too much about them myself until I explored them for this lesson. So here we are, the portrayal of Magwitch and Victorian prison ships. And there's a quote there from Magwitch. Single-handed, I got clear of the prison ship. You don't have to worry about any of that. Just have a look at that picture. Prison ships were, well, you'll see what they are. Right, the do now before we go any further. These are the misty. These are the misty December marshes where Pip meets Magwitch. I want you to write 5 sentences or phrases which describe this setting, and you'll remember it from the last lesson. Try to appeal to the reader's senses and use imagery, similes, metaphors, and personifications. I know you all know what metaphors, similes, and personifications are, but a metaphor is when you describe something as saying it is something else. A simile when you say it's like something else. Remember, the moon is like a silver coin is a simile, the moon is a silver coin is a metaphor, and a personification. The moon winked at me when you give, which is not a very good one, but is when you give something that's not human characteristics. 5 minutes for that, then on to the next slide. Okay, our learning objective is to explore the character of Magwitch from Great Expectations. So your title that goes into your books is Magwitch from Great Expectations. As ever for remote learning, we need to make sure we've got everything that we need. A pen, pencil and highlighter, a copy of the Great Expectations extract, which I'll put on Classcharts for you obviously, and your exercise book. Also, just a quick reminder, if your exercise books are getting full, just let me know and we deliver them to you. Here's 5 phrases that I came up with for the do now. The fog had captured the marshes, that's personification, and was reluctant to let it go. Here and there a small bird fluttered through the gloom, that's a bit of descriptive writing. The dampness clung to your clothes and soaked your feet, that's personification. Some madcap artist had streaked the land with grey, that's a metaphor. The marshland was like a faded photograph, all light and colour had seeped away, and that's a simile. Be interested to see what yours are. Right, Magwitch has escaped from one of the hulks, they're called, a prison ship on the Thames estuary. After the American War of Independence, the Victorians were no longer able to transport prisoners to America, so British prisons became incredibly overcrowded. So the Victorians used naval vessels that were no longer seaworthy as floating prisons. Click on the link in Classcharts to watch a video about life on board these ships. And that's the link there. So if you're watching this on video or PDF, you're not going to be able to do that. So I'll put the link into Classcharts for you. Now, this is the point at which you read the extract, the PDF which is attached to Classcharts, describing Pip bringing the food and file to sort of file his leg irons off to Magwitch. Find quotations which prove that Magwitch is the following: cold and unwell, starving, frightened and emotional. So you just want 1, 2, 3, 4 quotations there. So write cold and unwell, then your quote, starving, then your quote. That'll take you 15 minutes to do that, and then on to the next slide where I've done some for you. Here are some that I have found. Cold and unwell, hugging himself, shivered all the while so violently. I think you have the ague, which is a contemporary word for fever. Starving, handing mincemeat down his throat. He was gobbling mincemeat, meat bone, bread and cheese and pork pie all at once. Frightened, and often stopping, even stopping his jaws to listen. You're not a deceiving imp, are you? You brought no one with you. And emotional, a wretched varmint, hunted as near death and dunghill as this poor wretched varmint is. And he smeared his ragged rough sleeve over his eyes. Makes you wonder what Magwitch did to end up on that prison hulk. Wouldn't have to be a lot. Or alternatively, it might be something really terrible. Have to read the book to find out. Now, these hulks, these huge ships, this is at the height of Britain's naval power, so there were literally hundreds of these things. And when they became old, they tied them up in the estuary, which is a gloomy spot. You know, it's a Thames estuary in the 18th century. It's damp, misty, cold, miles from anywhere, and there'd be 400 or 500 of you stuck on this ship that's had all the masts taken off and put loads of just like loads of horrible cells in there. And that, and those of you that watched the YouTube clip, they would come off for a few hours a day to help build the docks that are there now. But at that time, it was mainly just marshland. So really thoroughly unpleasant, to say the least. But when prisoners escaped, they would use the old cannons and fire them to send soldiers out to pursue them. Pretty terrible posting for a soldier, actually, as well. Here Magwitch describes himself imagining the soldiers coming for him as he spent the night alone on the marshes. You know, because where all the docks are now, they were just marshes. It was just a big sort of boggy expanse that ran out to the sea, for the most part. I mean, in London, in the centre of London, there were docks, but round Sheppey and so on, it was very marshy. Why, see now, said he, when a man's alone on these flats with a light head and a light stomach, perishing of cold and want, he hears nothing all night but guns firing and voices calling. Hears? He sees the soldiers with their red coats lighted up by the torches and carried afore, closing in round him. Hears his number called, hears himself challenged, hears the rattle of the muskets, hears the orders, make ready, present, cover him, steady men, and he's laid hands on, and there's nothing. Why, if I see one pursuing party last night coming up in order, damn 'em, with their tramp, I see 100, and as to firing, why, I see the mist shake with the cannon after it was broad day. Well, your task is, how is Magwitch feeling in this extract? Make notes on how Dickens uses language and structure to show this. So you've got 10 minutes to do that, and then on to the next slide. And here's one I've done for you. There's plenty in there, so I'm hoping you've done something slightly different, or maybe you've got some of mine. Right, structurally, his exclamatory sentences create a sense of fear and urgency. That's the exclamation point there. Red and fire are symbols of danger. Closing in round him makes his fate seem inescapable. The repetition of hears makes these imaginary sounds seem constant. Blasphemy shows his anxiety. Magwitch describes these imaginary sounds which appeal to the reader's senses, tramp, tramp, and all these types of things. So there you go, there's one I've done. And I hope it's not dissimilar to the one that you've done. The next day after Pip's meeting with Magwitch, soldiers call at Pip's home, wanting Pip's brother-in-law, the blacksmith, to mend a pair of handcuffs. Pip finds himself accidentally on the manhunt for Magwitch, riding on the shoulders of his brother-in-law, the kindly Joe Gargery. When Magwitch is finally captured, he notices Pips and wants to make sure the young boy doesn't get into any trouble for helping him. Magwitch says that he was the one who stole food and a file from the blacksmith's home. He is taken back to the hulk. Now this is a description of Magwitch being rowed out to the prison ship and boarding. So this is a lovely piece of writing. This is the something that I had noticed before clicked in the man's throat again, and he turned his back. The boat had returned and his guard were ready, so he followed him to the landing place made of rough stakes and bones, and saw him put into the boat, which was rowed by a crew of convicts like himself. No one seemed surprised to see him, or interested in seeing him, or glad to see him, or sorry to see him, or spoke a word, except that somebody in the boat growled as if to dogs, "Give way, you," which was a signal for the dip of the oars. By the light of the torches we saw the black hulk lying out a little way from the mud of the shore, like a wicked Noah's Ark. Cribbed and barred and moored by massive rusty chains, the prison ships in my young eyes seemed to be ironed like the prisoners. We saw the boat go alongside, we saw him taken up the side and disappear. Then the ends of the torches were flung hissing into the water and went out, as if it were all over for him. Crikey, that's gloomy, isn't it? Imagine what it's like on that boat. Does not bear thinking about, does it? Now your task, and the thing that you're going to put onto Classcharts for me to have a look at, is to look at that passage that I just read and write a PEAL paragraph answering the question, how is the ship presented? So support your points with quotations, analyse the effect of language and structure, consider the effect of the quotations on the reader. So there you are. That shouldn't take, well, it takes as long as it takes you, I guess, but I would think 10 minutes. And that's, as I say, that's the thing I want you to put onto Classcharts. So I don't know about you, but I'm really enjoying these Dickens lessons, actually. I hope you are too. And do I see you tomorrow? I don't. No, I see you on Friday now, so I'll speak to you on Friday. Thank you, Year 8.